If you want some rock-solid reliability and almost unbeatable consistency in your games of 10th edition, then the updated rules for the Aeldari may be exactly what you are looking for, with some genuinely brilliant rules for helping you make every single shot count exactly when you need it the most. And their army rule is not battle focus, as I think some people may have thought it would be. Instead, it is the newly introduced in 9th edition rule of Strands of Fate. And this follows the same style of mechanic as it currently is, where there are some dice which you can generate which get you some guaranteed results for your dice rolls. They're not guaranteed sixes anymore, but they are guaranteed dice results. And the way it works is that you roll 12 d6 at the start of the battle, so you get a lot more of them front loaded at the start of the game, and these are your 12 Strands of Fate dice. If you don't like them, you can re-roll, but then you only get to keep 11 dice. And then if you don't like those, you can re-roll, and then you would roll 10 dice, and so on until you go down further and further and further until you get the set of dice that you want, or you just have one dice left. And then over the course of the turn, you can choose to substitute one of your dice rolls for a fate dice, and you can use them for advance rolls, hit rolls, battle shock rolls, a saving throw, a charge, a wound, or a damage roll. So for example, if you rolled them at the start of the turn and you rolled 12 1s and 2s, you would probably want to re-roll that and roll 11 dice to try and get some better ones. And then if you still rolled a load of 1 to 3s, you might think, you know what, I'll try it again. I know I'm only going to get 10 dice out of it, but I can probably get better than 11 1 to 3s. But it means that on average, you should be getting at least, a good 7 or 8 dice, which are at least in some way a guarantee on a roll. Because if you get a load of 3s and 4s, yeah, it's not 6s, so it's not the best thing you could get, but if you know you have weapons that hit on 3s and 4s, you may as well keep them because you can just use it for that, and it gives you that reliability. Like, you can be certain that you won't fluff that roll. You won't roll a 1 or a 2 because you can just use that 3 to guarantee it is going to be a hit. And obviously things like your 5s and 6s you can save for things like your guaranteed damage dice. So if you've got a d6 damage weapon, you can guarantee that's going to be a 6. So I do think that anything apart from 1s and 2s is going to be really worth keeping for your Strands of Fate dice. So it is a fairly forgiving mechanic, even if there is some randomness in it. And I mean, if you roll slightly above average, you are going to have potentially 12 automatically passed dice rolls, depending on what they may be. They may not be the most amazing dice rolls to get, but you can probably get 12 automatic passed dice rolls each battle round, which really is powerful in a dice game. So I think, yeah, in general, there is that bit of randomness to it that some people may not like, but the fact that you roll 12 dice and you can re-roll them up to, 11 different times, although obviously you're going to only end up with 1 or 2 dice if you do that. But the fact that you can re-roll them gives you a really, really good chance of getting at least a good 7 or 8 dice that you can really make use of. And having 7 or 8 guaranteed dice over the course of a battle round is just so powerful. And it gets even better than that with the Aeldari detachment, which is called the Battle Host detachment, and that gives you, it's arguably a bit of a slightly dull buff, I have to admit, but it is undeniably a very, very powerful one. Unparalleled Foresight lets you reroll 1 hit and 1 wound roll for each unit whenever they shoot or fight. So in addition to potentially 12 automatic hits or wounds with your Strands of Fate, or damage rolls with them if you want to use them, even on ones where you don't use the potential Strands of Fate dice, you are still getting a potential reroll of a hit and a wound. And for high strength, low rate of fire guns like missile launchers and bright lances, that is going to make them so unbelievably accurate and able to push those wounds through. You are going to be almost guaranteed throughput on an enemy that you target where you know you've got a reroll of a hit and a wound for it. So these two rules combined are really going to make the Aeldari just so unbelievably punishing when it comes to the sheer damage output they can reliably get through, and also the amount of damage they can take and reliably save, because if they know they're on a 5-up save, they can just save some 5-up Strands of Fate dice rolls, and they know that no matter what, they will be able to make those saving throws. We also, of course, get to see some new datasheets. We get to see datasheets for both the Farseer and the Guardian Defenders. Farseers have actually lost a wound, going down to 4 instead of 5, and the Singing Spear has lost its Fleshbane style wound on 2+, although the Witchblade has kept it in the form of anti-infantry 2+. They are both still somewhat mediocre. There is good strength on the spear's shooting profile, but apart from that, it is just some low strength, 0 AP hits in melee, and even with the 3 or 2 damage that they have, the melee of a Farseer is definitely not going to be the thing you are going to be writing home about. Where the Farseer is still undeniably good is in his psychic powers and his other buffs that he brings to your army. He's got Fortune as a power, which doesn't give a 5-up feel no pain anymore. Instead, it grants a unit within 12 inches a -1 to be wounded, which on low toughness things like Aeldari is really, really handy, and putting it on bigger, tougher things like the Wraith units is going to make them incredibly tanky, especially with their presumably boosted toughness profiles that they'll be getting alongside the other monsters and vehicles that we've seen so far. He also has the Branching Fates power, which lets you once per turn, when you use a Fate dice on a unit within 12 inches of the Farseer, turn that roll into a 6. So even if you rolled your 12 dice and you got a really good set, but you got 2 1s in the mix, but you wanted to keep it because of the rest of the dice were so good, you could reliably know that you can use one of those dice on a unit, and instead of it counting as that 1, it would count as a 6. So even if you roll a bit of a dud set in your 12 Fate dice, you can somewhat get around it with a Farseer or 2 by turning those dud dice into guaranteed 6s. And I think this rule is going to make having a really solid set of 12 almost guaranteed successes in your Strands of Fate really quite easy to achieve. And so from that point alone, I think the Farseer seems like a very strong pick still. He has lost a few bits in a few areas, and I think he's maybe not quite as much of a must-take as he has been previously, at least from what we've seen so far. But again, if you want that consistency and that reliability in your dice throws, he is absolutely going to bring that in spades, and from that point alone, I think he's going to be well worth bringing in a list. Defenders are still 1 wound with toughness 3 and a 4-up save, but they do still have their absolutely brilliant selection of weapons. Things like Bright Lances have gained a boost to strength 12 and d6 plus 2 damage instead of the d3 plus 3 that they have. They have lost a pip of AP, but going from strength 8 to strength 12 is a very, very nice boost in 10th edition. And in a big change, it also seems that Shuriken has lost its old rending style rule. The catapult is 2 shots at strength 4, -1 AP and 1 damage with the assault rule, and then the bigger Shuriken cannon is still 3 shots, but it gets sustained hits 1. So it now gets extra hits on 6s rather than the extra AP on 6s to wound like it has now. So that is a fairly big change. It does seem like mass shuriken punching through a load of armor on wound rolls of 6s may be a thing of the past now, but sustained fire 1 on the shuriken cannon is a fairly nice buff, and I do think the flat -1 AP is still going to be good in an edition where a lot of other AP is being toned down, so it still should comparatively feel like you've got a good bit of rend compared to some other armies. They also get a very cool rule for, again, interacting with the Strands of Fate. Defenders of Fate means that when you are within range of an objective with a unit of Guardians, you can roll an extra d6 to add to your pool. So if you had 6 units of Guardians on different objectives, you could be getting a total of 18 dice rather than the current 12 that you get in your Strands of Fate. And that is a huge amount of potential for all of those 3s and 4s and 5s and 6s to guarantee some hit rolls or some damage rolls or some saving throws. So that is a really, really powerful rule just for buffing the entirety of your army. We also get shown off one of the most terrifying weapons in the Aeldari arsenal, the Prism Cannon. This still has 2 profiles, Pulse and Lance. The Pulse is 2d6 shots at strength 6, -1 AP and 2 damage with Blast. So it has lost a pip of AP, and 2d6 shots is It's technically a bit better than 3d3, but it does seem much too swingy for my liking. You are on average going to roll higher, but I like the reliability of doing a minimum of 3 and the maximum of 9 rather than the swinginess of 2 to 12. Although it is worth mentioning that the blast rule change does help it massively, and it means that even into a squad of say 10 Marines, you will be reliably getting 4 shots into them, so it's not quite as bad as it seems. You shouldn't be getting 2 shots unless you're shooting into like single target units or units with less than 5 models in. The Lance has had a hugely beefed up strength profile. It is now strength 18. It's still got 2 shots and is -4 AP with a flat 6 damage. And again, this has changed from the old profile. It used to be 3d3 damage, so it has gained infinite more reliability, but at the cost of losing that potential max 9 damage. I think in general, I do prefer flat 6 damage to 3d3 just because of that reliability. Like, I would much rather know I will be doing 6 damage to an enemy rather than knowing I could be doing anything from 3 to 9, because then you can really sort of plan ahead and kind of estimate what sort of damage and what you can kill in one volley rather than just hoping for a good roll on the damage. It also still has the cool linked fire rule, which means that you can fire these guns from any friendly visible fire prism, so you can pretty much get these shots all over the board. You measure distance and line of sight from any friendly fire prism, so there is pretty much going to be nowhere on the board that is safe from these guns if you have a couple sort of spread out across your battle line. So no matter where the enemy tries to hide their big key important vehicles, you should be able to get a bead on them. And then finally, we also see a return of the ever popular stratagem Fire and Fade. This still essentially lets you get some free movement after the shooting phase, and for 2 CP you can choose a unit at the end of your shooting phase and it can make a normal move. Now, it doesn't have to be infantry or anything specific like that, it just cannot be an aircraft, and the unit also can't be engagement range of the enemy. So there's a few limitations, but they're not particularly bad. But it does mean that your fire support units can very much still move out in the movement phase, shoot at an enemy, and then duck back behind cover at the end of the shooting phase. It is not cheap at 2 CP in the new 10th edition, where CP is a lot less prevalent, so it probably won't be a stratagem that you'll be able to use every single turn if there's other stratagems that you want to take advantage of, but it is going to be a very key, important one for keeping your fragile long-range units alive, and of course it is still going to frustrate the absolute hell out of your opponent. So that is it for the Aeldari. There are some very strong rules shown off today, and they are still very much keeping to the fluff of the Aeldari as this fast, fluid, mobile, and very, very reliable contender on the battlefields. So I really like that. I really like that they've kept that feeling to them, but they've almost reined it in a little bit. I don't think that the Strands of Fate dice are quite as obnoxious as they have been in 9th, but they are still potentially very, very powerful. But as always, what do you think of these rules? And what do you think the Aeldari are going to be like on the battlefields of 10th edition? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.